Welcome to Esalen Live, where we chat with change agents and swim deep waters in an ongoing exploration of human potential. I'm your host, Christine Chen. As we move toward the end of 2021, do you want to break free of getting in your own way? Best-selling author and longtime Esalen faculty, Bill Donius, says it's all about meeting your better half, and he joins us live on Esalen Live today, and he's going to lead us through an exercise to try to start figuring it out. It's a big question, right, Bill? Like, how do we figure ourselves out as we end up in the end of a 2 year cycle that's just been the strangest ever for so many people?
Yeah, I guess that's the big eternal question too, right? Rather than just over the last 2 years, it's been more challenging because we've been in adverse situations. But yeah, that's the big question, becoming more self-aware, learning how to tap in to use all the potential that we have, figuring out what that potential is. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so a lot of it sometimes is we get in our own way. It's very easy to look outward and say, oh, it's this circumstance. But you kind of live in the side that we can empower ourselves to do so by first doing this, which is trying to understand our self-limiting beliefs. What are those? Help us understand.
Well, those are all the things that keep us playing small, I think. That where we say that we don't believe we can do whatever it is, that we can be in a relationship, that we can lose weight, that we can be good at work, that we can be creative, that we can be logical, that we can be better in relationship, whatever it is. Those things can become true for us over time because we just start to believe them and then they limit us.
Yeah. If you're just watching us on Esalen Live right now, we're with Bill Donius, best-selling author and also longtime Esalen faculty. We're talking about getting in your own way with self-limiting beliefs. So if you have any questions, please float them in the chat. And if anything's helping you in this, please send Bill a little bit of love as well. So we're talking about self-limiting beliefs, and that sometimes leads to self-limiting patterns. So can you explain how they work together and what the difference is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will qualify this by saying that this is a lot of this is self-learned, in working and being in therapy for 8 years and working with psychologists, psychiatrists, and the writing of my book and the 200 interviews I did. So I'm not professionally trained, but I've learned a lot along the way, and I guess I was potentially Exhibit A myself because my self-limiting behaviors and beliefs might be, for instance, that I'm not good in relationships, and I had about 20 years of evidence to suggest that I was right. So how do you break through that? And there's a point at which scientists would say we become encultured in habits and routines. So we it's like muscle memory. We get to believe those things because we've seen many times over, in my case, 20 years of dating and bad results, and the Jerry Seinfeld of, this person isn't right for this reason, that reason. And so finally, you have to either take that on or it just overruns your and becomes your life if you don't break that cycle. So the pattern happens when we just do it over and over, as Einstein would say, doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result.
Is the definition of insanity. I think the rest of that goes, right?
Yeah, that.
Katie, thank you for this, is what she says. And thank you, Katie, for joining us. If you have any questions or something to add to the conversation, please definitely point it into the chat. And also, if what Bill is saying is resonating with you, please send him a thumbs up or a little heart emoji or something like that. So, where do these patterns usually come from? We have limiting beliefs that sometimes lead to repeat behavior, limiting patterns. They start somewhere. You mentioned 20 years of dating behavior, but they come from somewhere else, I think. Yes?
Yes, agreed. And for many of us, they come from a dark place, which was true for me. That it comes from a place where earlier in childhood, maybe we learned certain things, or we were, not treated appropriately, or even abused in certain ways. So these lessons that we learn early on can stay with us for the rest of our life if we don't learn how to break through and get the awareness is the first step of we're in this pattern, and because a lot of times we don't know, which was the case for me. I didn't know why. If I knew the answer, I would have fixed it, long time before. So we need to break through and get to the why we're behaving in this way and why this pattern has governed our life in a certain way. And then that it actually is that in my experience is about 80% of it. And then the unbreaking that pattern, breaking through, is perhaps the easier part of learning how to create healthier habits and move forward.
Mm. You mentioned your dating life as one case study. Have you witnessed clients or people who attend your workshops have these breakthroughs for maybe the first time in their lives?
Absolutely. It's what makes this work very worthwhile. I saw this in my own life, and it's an honor, a privilege to share this process with others. Yes, and every single case that there are people that are getting transformational insights that help them really understand why they've been trapped in a certain pattern. And I would say that in a workshop, I would say most, not all, I would say most get at least one super helpful breakthrough insight that explains a part of their behavior in life.
Can you give us some examples of that, Bill? Like what are some of the stories that you've heard that have ended up in this transformative moment just by paying attention to the beliefs and the patterns and the right and the left brain, which we'll address in just a second?
Yes, that's a great question. And there was in the last workshop there was a 70-year-old man who had not visited his parents' gravesite since they had passed, and had a grudge against them most of his entire adult life. And he was able to dive in and go deep and understand what that was about and why that was happening, and then wrote back um, weeks after the workshop that he had visited the gravesite for the first time and didn't feel the animus that he felt prior.
And this is about meeting your better half, you say, which sometimes resides in the right brain from your perspective. Describe left and right brain briefly, if you will, and then why this relates to the work that we're talking about.
Sure, and that slide is that you found is a great one. I might ask to borrow it actually, but
Okay.
the left side is you depict there is the kind of business brain, if you will. It's the linear, logical, analytical, mathematical, rational part of our brain, linear sequencing that basically puts food on the table, gas in the car, keeps us going. And the right is very different. The right is more about intuition and creativity and that sense of wholeness, problem solve, artistry, music, spirituality, higher consciousness. Also, problem solving, interestingly enough, is considered to be a right brain characteristic in terms of functionality. Dr. Roger Sperry won a Nobel Prize in 1981 for this work, and there's been a lot of work since then. And candidly, it's still an area that many in the scientific community debate how, why, what works. We're learning about in the about how the brain works every year. There seems to be some new breakthrough. So I always say, whether you believe this metaphorically or literally, if it's working for you, then it's something you may want to consider.
Well, I want to ask those of you who are watching here on Esalen Live, Katie, that includes you. I know you're still with us. Right and left brain. Do you think that you lead more in your life with your right or left brain? Give it a moment to think about it because we're about to dive into an exercise. Uh, Bill's point of view is that the better half is the one. Well, I'm going to let you say it. The better half. What's the better half with the right and the left brain?
Well, and I phrased it that way, meet your better half, because in my experience and what I've seen from the hundreds of people that I've worked with one-on-one, and then much bigger audiences, kind of around the country and even around the world to a lesser extent, it's it's that place that we can't as easily get to, but where this sort of eternal wisdom is stored. And it does feel like we're able to tap into that higher consciousness, that the creativity, the intuition that we're gifted with, and be able to get that. It's like it's all of us may have experienced those moments where we have fleeting moments of this, where we think I need to do this or do that, and it turns out to be paid off really well when we do it. But it's that place of I guess it's difficult to get to, just maybe like meeting a better half in real life is hard to do. This is hard to do because most people don't even know it's there or that they can do it. So
Yeah.
that's
You
what
know,
makes it a little more difficult.
right away, Dion and Christina weighed in. Left brain. It was almost immediate. And thank you for sharing that. Do you lead with your right or your left brain? That's a question for those of you watching on Esalen Live as we dive into ourselves. A little bit of a practice to kind of figure it out. Let's talk about that, Bill. The better half, the part of the brain we don't use much. And there's exercises to get us there. Why don't you lead us in that one of those?
Yes, and I can say that as a starter to that, that 92% of us in this country are right hand dominant, and only obviously 8% of us then are left hand dominant. So um, in this case, the discovery was that it's the non-dominant hand, regardless of handedness, that allows us to activate the neural pathways to the right side of the brain. So in this case, and do you want to do the exercise right now?
Yeah, go ahead. I
Okay,
definitely.
okay.
And also, Carmen, thank you very much. She weighed in with the right brain.
And it's wonderful those that I have seen in the 200 interviews that I did for the research for the book. I have seen those that are left hand dominant being more, I would say, more creative, more artistic, maybe able to see more of the big picture and small picture at the same time. And so there is some evidence that left hand dominant people are able to access the neural pathway to that more creative side. So I've seen that many times, and I believe it also, interestingly, I think it's 5 of the last 6 US presidents are left hand dominant.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I have a yoga explanation for that as well. We'll talk about that another time. Go ahead and lead us in an exercise
Okay,
here.
so what I'd like folks to do is put the pen in your dominant hand, whichever that is, left or right, the one you write with on a conventional, typical basis. And I'd like you just simply to answer this question. The question is, as it applies to you, if I were an animal, what animal would I be? So, what animal would you be? Bam, write down your answer. Okay, so hopefully that's the easier part of this equation. What we're going to do next is where we get to experience this activation for ourselves. So what I would invite you to do is put the pen now in your non-dominant hand, left or right, non-dominant. And in this case, perhaps close your eyes, reset your brain. There's no judgment. You have to suspend disbelief about what you know, about what you think you're going to write down, about why and how. Just let all that noise go. That noise also is part of that inner critic that's potentially always with us. So just let all that go and allow the process to happen. And I'm going to ask a question and just allow it to surface and allow that activation to occur with your hands separate. I'll ask the question. You may see it, feel it, hear it, write down whatever comes to mind. So the question, as it applies to you, is if I were an animal, what animal would I be? Bam. Write it down. You may see it, feel it, hear it, whatever comes to mind, write it down. So I suspect what's happening there is if for 90% of the people that have done this with me all around the country and in the world is that um, probably 90% come up with a different answer from the right hand versus the left hand. And then interestingly, of those with the dominant hand, 80% of the people that write this with their dominant hand, I found, get one of only four animals: dog, cat, horse, or bird, which I
Hmm.
think reflects the way we think of the world in a more conventional, maybe even more narrow way from our vantage point. That's also part of the how we can get stuck in these patterns, because we can get really dialed in, kind of tunnel-like in vision, and so you'll see at 80% of the people that get this get a very different answer with their non-dominant hand, and that non-dominant hand answer can be wildly different from what we got the first time around, and I think is initial evidence that something different is happening in our brains. It's like, how can that be that the exact same question produces a different answer from the allegedly from the right side of the brain?
So interesting. I want to ask you what some of these animals mean because I see a lot of chat coming in about, wait a minute, these are the animals I got. What does this mean? Are you willing to answer some of this right now, Bill?
Yeah, yes, sure.
Okay. So, Carmen, let's start with you. Dominant hand elephant.
Mhm.
Ooh,
And I think that elephants, this is mostly anecdotal. I mean, I think there are some great books out there on animal tokens and what they mean and how to interpret them. So I would suggest looking at that. But the elephants are known to be, animals with great memories, to be wise. They travel in packs. They're very beautiful to watch. Um, and so oftentimes that is I find that coming up more as a non-dominant hand answer, but again, it's I think they're both true. It's we're essentially surfacing different parts of our personality. So we might get dog with one response, and then snake with the other. And I've noticed that there are those that get snake. When you think about it, what a snake does, it travels through the grass, is very studied before it strikes, and so that may describe some people if that are very careful and studied and kind of even stealthy,
okay.
and so it's
So,
there are things like that.
Carmen's dominant hand elephant. With her non-dominant hand, she had tiger, and she's right-handed.
Okay. Tiger is, I think, could be, and I should point out that what I like to do, and we could do this as a second question, but I like to ask people the follow-on question: what characteristics do I share, in this case, with a tiger?
Okay.
Because candidly, what I'm thinking isn't really as relevant as to what she may get from her own right brain about the answer that she got, in this case, tiger.
Well, let's just share a couple of the animals that came up so we can just lightly touch on those and maybe dive a little
Okay.
bit deeper. Conrad had a dominant tiger, non-dominant gorilla. I think it's the first time we've seen gorilla, right?
Yeah.
Between when
Yeah.
we've done this before.
Yeah.
Ralph has dominant cow, non-dominant pig.
Great.
And then, yeah,
So
so tell us what some of this, I mean, just go light.
yeah.
I know
So
this is a lot of work, so.
this is the beginning of a journey with those animals that were identified, courtesy of what we might say the right half. We're essentially meeting the right half of our brain, and that right half is giving us an additional lens through which we can look at ourselves and understand how we behave, why we behave in a certain way. It can be metaphorical, it can be literal. Like with the gorilla, it might be, it's a big, powerful, strong animal that's able to do many things, big hands, climb trees, and but it can be, obviously it, humans we have some of those properties in life we can use, but this is I found that in doing this work, it's often not extremely literal. There's an image that somehow is provoking our right brains and allowing us to learn more. So by going deeper and saying why gorilla, why pig, we learn more about ourselves than would otherwise be the case.
Well, I want to share this one last answer as we're out of time, but I want to share it with you, Bill, so you could go on and answer it for Dion because I really think this is fascinating. She's very specific. Dominant right, cat, non-dominant left, butterfly, but the brilliant blue butterflies from the Amazon rainforest. Very specific. So we'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Dion, for that contribution because I want to say if you would like to work with Bill, he has a workshop coming up. And this type of work is happening, but so much else is happening as well. Will you do some other exercises and take people through a deeper journey over the couple of days? Is that correct, Bill?
Oh yeah, this is the very, very tip of the iceberg. We learn about why we're, how we can be more energized in life, how we can be more creative, how we can break through those patterns, be better in relationships, be more creative, lose weight, whatever it is, why we don't like our brother-in-law, just all the stuff that has kind of stayed at a distance. We're able to activate that brain and get some additional wisdom that's there for us. So that's the beauty of it, because there's so much more we can learn about ourselves. And this is a really effective, fast, easy way to do so.
Well, Bill, Donius, thank you so much for joining us on Esalen Live. It's always a pleasure. I hope you got some great stuff out of it. If you've been watching Esalen Live, send them a little love in the chat, heart emoji, a thumbs up emoji if any of this related to your life at all or just helped you in any way, shape, or form. Thanks a lot, Bill. Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you so much, Christine.